Today I'm going to make a little bit of a longer video because yesterday I saw something that I couldn't believe. So yesterday, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, led by their CEO Stephen Brown, along with other Palestinian leaders, announced the first model legislation in Canadian history that was to chart the course as a nation for Palestinian human rights. They've called this legislation the Nakba Bill, or an act for Canada to stand for human rights and peace in the Middle East. Brown spoke calmly and eloquently as he explained the narrative of the Nakba, and it all sounded rather righteous. I mean, what Canadian wouldn't want to stand for human rights and peace? However, as Brown outlined the legislation, I heard many historical inaccuracies and an illogical conflation of ideas. So I'm going to try to explain it to you in under 10 minutes. He made 7 main points as he was speaking to introduce the legislation. So the first was that Brown begins by stating Palestinians around the world mark the Nakba on May 15th each year as the day 700,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes by Jews, as Jews formed the nation of Israel. Simply not historically accurate. The narrative is that the much well-armed and well-financed Jews arrived in Israel in 1948 and pushed peaceful Palestinians from their homes and land. The historical reality and truth is completely different. But to understand that, you just need a little background, so please bear with me. Essentially, Jews come from Judea and Samaria, and Arabs come from Arabia. However, there have always been Jews living in the land of Palestine or Israel, but as Jews were conquered by various invaders over the last 2,000 years, they were expelled from the land by the Romans, the Byzantines, Caliphates, Crusaders, and finally by the Ottomans. Although they did have a presence in the area, they were a minority, ruled over by the Muslim Ottomans from 1516 to 1917. During this time, Muslims referred to Jews as an inferior, weak, and stateless people called dhimmi. The Ottomans lost World War I. The British came in to form a mandate where they would teach the peoples living there, the Jews and the Muslims, to live in peace. The British sought to split the land. That idea was outrageous to the Arabs. I don't have time here to discuss all the partition plans, but essentially, the British Foreign Minister, Ernest Bevin, reported that the mandate was exhausted because for Jews, the essential point of principle was the creation of a sovereign Jewish state. For the Arabs, it was to resist to the last the establishment of a Jewish state. Bevin recommended partition of the land into 2 states, Jewish and Arab. Jews agreed, Arabs did not. So on May 14th, 1948, when the British withdrew, Israel declared her independence. On that same day, 5 Arab states, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt, declared war on Israel. Brown and the National Council of Canadian Muslims want you to believe that Israel kicked all the Muslims out, but this isn't true. At the height of the war, when Israel was far from assured of winning, Ben-Gurion read out the Declaration of Independence in Tel Aviv. He called upon Arabs to participate in the building of the state of the basis of equal and full citizenship. 150,000 Arabs, then 1/5 of Israel's population, stayed and became citizens, which I saw with my own eyes. 2 million Arab Muslims are citizens of Israel today. The fact remains that Palestinians did leave. Some followed the wealthy elite and their jobs as the wealthy left to avoid war. Some were urged to leave by Arab leaders who told them they could return after the Arabs won the war. And some Arabs, like those in Haifa who were begged to stay, chose to leave lest they be seen as traitors or collaborators in the case that the Arabs won. It does remain true that some people did leave due to battles, but we need to keep in mind the nature of this war as a major contributor to the Arabs' departure, more than any specific incidents or fighting. And here I will quote Dr. Einat Wilf, her book, The War of Return. The Arabs saw this as a struggle between life and death. The Secretary General of the Arab League declared on the eve of this war that this will be a war of extermination and momentous massacre, which will be spoken of like the Mongolian massacre and the Crusades. In a telegram to the Arab League at the start of the hostilities, Ismail Safwat, who is in charge of coordination between the different Arab forces, described the war objectives, starting with to eliminate the Jews of Palestine and to completely cleanse the country of them. In March 1948, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and the leader of the Palestinians, who declared the Arabs would continue to fight until the Zionists were eliminated and the whole of Palestine was purely Arab, state that the Arabs lost that war and then first used the word Nakba to describe the humiliation and shame of losing to the dhimmi or inferior people. The catastrophe or the Nakba was not the movement of people, as Brown wants you to believe, but rather it was the loss of the war. The second point Brown and the National Council of Canadian Muslims refers to is the movement out of Palestine of 700,000 Arabs as one of the most tragic events in modern history. This isn't true either. They will argue that the war inflicted a terrible tragedy on them and that they suffered an exceptional injustice in the expulsion and movement of 700,000 people. There is nothing exceptional about this. Between World War I and the end of the Cold War, population exchanges were considered legitimate under international law, and the separation of warring parties was considered key to peacemaking between different ethnic groups. And here I'm going to give you about 4 examples. So the Greco-Bulgarian peace treaty in 1919, 46,000 ethnic Greek citizens of Bulgaria moved to Greece, and 96,000 ethnic Bulgarian Greeks moved to Bulgaria. They signed a treaty 4 years later. That treaty moved 1.2 million ethnic Greek citizens of Turkey in exchange for 600,000 ethnic Turkish citizens of Greece. Another example is after World War II, 12 million ethnic Germans who, like the Palestinians, lost a war, were expelled from lands that are now Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Ukraine, Romania, Yugoslavia, and the Baltic states. 1 million Poles left Western Ukraine and Western Belarus, as these areas ran next to the Soviet Union. In Asia, with the establishment of India and Pakistan, religiously mixed areas were caught up in violence of 3.5 million people were killed. Muslims fled India for Pakistan, and Hindus left Pakistan for India. Estimates of the number of displaced people range between 10 and 14 million. And the most interesting in relation to the National Council of Canadian Muslims is that 700,000 Jews living in North Africa and the Middle East had their property and wealth seized after the establishment of Israel. These Jews were expelled from the nations. The difference in all of these instances and what happened in Palestine is that the people involved accepted defeat, settled in new countries, and began new lives, whereas Palestinians chose to be eternal refugees because they cannot accept losing a war 80 years ago. Brown goes on to his third point, to claim that both Trump and Netanyahu want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Again, incorrect. The definition of ethnic cleansing is a systematic forced removal of ethnic, racial, or religious groups with the intent of making the society homogeneous. Gaza has 400 miles of underground tunnels under a nation only 25 miles by 27 miles square, or 675 miles square. The buildings above have bombed and fallen and have now been booby-trapped by Hamas. Trump and Netanyahu want the Gazans to willingly leave so the tunnels can be cleared and the booby traps can be cleared and the buildings can be rebuilt. Fourth, Brown quotes our Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, saying, "We cannot allow the continued use of food as a political tool." Then he goes on to say that Israel is using starvation as an active war. Again, not true. All one has to do is go to the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, otherwise known as COGAT, C-O-G-A-T. COGAT facilitates humanitarian aid for Gaza. It has both a website and an Instagram that you can easily go to verify all I am saying. COGAT tracks and records all aid moved into Gaza. Every shipment is documented by origin and route. Food aid accounts for 46% of all aid, which amounts to 1,774,459 tons of aid since the beginning of the war. In February 2025 alone, 216,000 tons of aid entered Gaza. 1/3 of all food aid entered Gaza during the last ceasefire, during 6 weeks. If the United Nations is now telling us that their warehouses are empty, they should go to the markets of Gaza, where we see it being sold, because Hamas has stolen the aid and is selling it on black markets. Our taxpayer money has gone to making the leaders of Hamas together have a net worth of over $11 billion. Brown next reminds Canadians that Israel is facing charges of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Genocide is defined as the ethnic cleansing, systematic forced removal of ethnic, racial, or religious groups with the intent of making the society homogeneous. The population of Gaza has increased 2% since October 7th. Jonathan Spencer, the world's topmost expert in warfare, has been to Gaza 5 times. He has unequivocally stated that there is no genocide. In fact, he states the civilian to combatant death ratio is less than 2 to 1. To put this in perspective, during the Persian Gulf, the ratio was 7 to 1. The United Nations experts estimate that in urban warfare, 10 civilians are often killed for every combatant. That makes Israel's rate of 2 to 1 far lower in a dense, 3-dimensional urban warfare. It is remarkable so many deaths, including thousands of women and children, of course, are horrific, but it doesn't constitute genocide. Jonathan Spencer, a military expert, has also assessed Israel's morality and states the truth is that Israel has painstakingly followed the laws of armed conflict and implemented many steps to prevent civilian casualties, despite enormous challenges, including almost 500 miles of tunnels, 30,000 Hamas operatives embedded in and under civilian areas, and protected sites such as hospitals, mosques, schools, and UNRWA facilities. The population of Gaza, like I said, has increased 2% during the war. Especially interesting regarding the International Court of Justice is the lead prosecutor, Karim Khan, has recently been accused of raping his assistant, a Muslim from Singapore, who said he repeatedly led her to the bed and told her not to say anything as it would harm Palestine. 2.5 weeks after Khan learned of these allegations, he announced arrest warrants for Gallant and Netanyahu. That move, many believe, was designed to take attention from him. I remind you that none of those allegations have been proven. The allegations against Gallant or Netanyahu have been proven. Then Brown talks about how Canadians and Gazans are both living beside an aggressive neighbor. In our case, it's Trump. In their case, it's supposed to be Israel. This casts Israel as the aggressor, which is not true. Hamas is the aggressor. Hamas crossed the borders. Hamas is the elected government of Gaza. They attacked Israeli civilians living in kibbutzim or in towns, or just simply dancing in a music festival. It was Hamas that raped, mutilated, massacred civilians, not Israel. Brown discusses sovereignty and tries to align Canada, Greece, and Greenland as all being annexed by Trump. Most obviously, one of those states is not like the others. 2 are sovereign democratic states. Gaza and Palestine have been offered sovereignty repeatedly and have always said no, because they want all the land and cannot recognize Israel. 2 of those states are democratic. 1, Gaza, is a terror state funded by Iran, working with Hezbollah and the Houthis to bring down a sovereign state. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. All of these points are ridiculous to my mind. However, the most important thing that Brown said was that he wants this bill to encourage easy immigration of Gazans who currently have to watch the death of their family members live streamed on the news. What kind of mental inversion is this? On 10/7, Hamas live-streamed the killing, rape, and mutilation of their victims, using the victims' own phones. They used Facebook Live, so their families had to watch. I hope you will stand with me against this legislation. Either way, I just wanted you to be informed. Thank you for your time, as I know this video is longer than my last.